evening and welcome to the City of East Providence City Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, January 7th, 2020. May we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, may we start the new year off with a roll call, please?
Yes. Councilman Cahoon.
Here.
Councilman Morato.
Here.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Here.
Councilwoman Souza. Here. And Council President Brito.
Here. Next item.
Next item, that would be the consent calendar.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye.
Make a motion to close and seal the minutes of executive session.
Would anyone like to second that motion?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
Next item is public comment, and I'm going to run and get that real quick.
Anyone here from the public wishing to speak today in public comment? Oh, you do? Okay. She's going to bring the sign form up shortly. That's what that does. I do this. I pour it in. Yeah. Once you stop.
Okay, the first person for public comment is Diana Passant.
First and only.
First and only short-term rental ordinance.
Please step right up to the podium. Can you just state your name for the record, please?
Sure. Diana Poisson. So I'm here with a few neighbors of mine from Richmond Point, and specifically for the short-term rental agenda topic, which we happened to find when we were looking at or trying to research more on the right-of-way that was recently sold on Beach Point to a private citizen. But I've already spoken to Council Vice President Rodrick about that and hope to continue those conversations. But it's a very, Richmond Point is a very close-knit neighborhood. People have lived there their entire lives. There's quite a few people who have lived there their entire lives, including a 95-year-old woman. And everyone knows everyone. And more recently, some of the properties that have been purchased, they're now up on Airbnb, two specifically that are always promoted, and then there's 3 other properties that have more short-term rentals, a fluctuation of people in and out. And for a community like that, it's a little concerning with strangers in and out of the neighborhood all the time. And we're just really interested in, learning to listening and, how this is going to be addressed. 4th of July last year, we look out the window and there's a group of people like around our cars leaning on them. And, just with all these strangers in and out, we're just concerned. And I'd like to learn more.
I apologize for my ignorance, but where is Richmond Point?
So it's over by Haynes Park, over by the terrace. So the terrace is here, Haynes Park is here. We're kind of in the middle there.
I've only lived in East Providence for 25 years, so excuse me.
Me too.
That's that piece of land we sold in that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
He doesn't leave room for too much.
Can I comment on that? Can I comment?
I don't know, Mr. Solicitor, can we comment with members of the public? Did you want to start?
So, Councilman Rodrick and I have looked into this issue. We've heard numerous complaints. There's other streets on the terrace that's going through the same issues. There's another street in Riverside that's going through the same issue. A lot of municipalities have adopted ordinances And just rest assured that we have an ordinance that we it's up for discussion today, and that it looks like we will be moving forward with that as time goes on. So we are, trying to address that issue.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Just to add to that, what Mrs. Poisson, thank you for your call. And we started a couple meetings ago to have a discussion in this regard. I'm passing out to the council just for them to look at later, and I think Council President Brito gave you a copy. I have a couple more if anyone wants. Just what state of Rhode Island requires, and I think that cities throughout Rhode Island are starting to comply. A lot of us have not. And I think we have several short-term rentals, less than 30 days, that are in the city, and we want to make sure, number one, that they're done legally, they're paying any fees that they are required to, like state taxes, and also that it's appropriate, that we don't have someone bringing in, like the movie, even though I like the movie, but the Animal House, where we have 50 people showing up to rent 3 nights so they can go hang down at the beach at Sabin Point or wherever. So we're going to look into all of that, and our attorneys formulating some resolutions for us, and I think you'll have our support. We do as much as we can. They're not illegal. You can have Airbnbs, VRBOs, all of those things, but I think they can be regulated. And my other concern, lastly, would be that they are safe and that proper inspections are done. They have fire code regulations met, and again, you don't have a bunch of people renting a place that doesn't have smoke detectors or might be a problem. So I know from our point of view, I'm sure we'll keep on top of it. And if the only problem I see is finding out where they are. Because if people do it and don't register and don't tell us, we have to rely on the neighborhoods letting us know, or calling City Hall and saying there's a bunch of people renting rooms in a house and they didn't tell anybody.
Well, in our neighborhood, it's 1 Beach Point Drive and 54 North Shore Drive. 55 North Shore. Those are actively promoted on Airbnb. Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Next item, please.
We are done with public comment.
We
We
are.
have mayoral appointments with council approval, Economic Development Commission, Dean Emramare. The term would be from January 8th, 2020 to January 8th, 2025.
Mr. Furtado.
Council President, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, other members of the council. So I apologize for the lateness of this. I know I normally give you a heads up, or at least I try to. Because of the holiday, things got thrown out of whack a little bit. But I believe I got the chance to speak to some of you, at least, about this appointment. Mr. Emramare is both a resident but also a business owner in the city. He operates a small business. And I sent you earlier today a copy of his resume and also his application for the board, and it did go through the ordinance process. But I first met him along with the mayor. He volunteers at Oasis International, which is an organization, it's a Pan-African organization that helps various African immigrants that come into the country. It's based in Providence, but they work all over the state. And he came over from Nigeria about 15 years ago, I want to say. And he has kind of worked his way up from starting off in CCRI, and now he's managing, a 5-vehicle fleet transportation company right here in the center of the city. So between those two things, we thought it would be he would be the perfect candidate for this appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Furtado. At the pleasure of the council. Any questions?
Mr. President, the only thing I would say is the resume, I don't know the gentleman, but resume is impressive. I think we're bringing some diversity to the committee, which is important, and I would be in favor of this.
Okay.
I have no
Is that a-
questions and move to approve.
Okay, so
Second.
we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Cahoon
Sorry.
for approval, and a seconded by Councilman Roderick. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Furtado. Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is under Council Communications, and that's notification of Grassy Plains Community Meeting, January 23rd, 6 p.m. Councilman Morato and Councilman Cahoon.
So I put this on the agenda. It's just just want to do a reminder. I'm hosting a community meeting regarding the future plans for Grassy Plains Park on January 23rd, 6 p.m. at the church located on Rounds Ave, 165 Rounds Ave, Covenant Church. I picked that location because it's centralized to the neighbors and neighborhood around Grassy Plain Park. I just want to hear the concerns and opinions as to the future of the park. Unfortunately, I could not invite more than one council person. I really wanted Councilman Rodrick to be involved in this, but however, I will be reporting to the council the opinions and the direction as to where the community would like this park. So again, it's January 23rd, 6 p.m. at the Covenant Church on Rounds Ave.
Thank you, Councilman. Next item.
Next item is process of charter review and revision for 2020 discussion. Councilman Morato.
So I put this on the agenda again. I really would like to start maybe having dates, if the council desires to have special workshops on this, or just start introducing ideas as these council meetings continue for the year. The timeline for this, it needs to be in if we do want to decide, if we do decide to do some charter cleanup language for some of the things that might have been missed. We have to submit it by August 5th, which really does not give us a lot of time since there's only one meeting in July. And is there one or two meetings in June? I believe there's only
Two in June.
two in June. So
Two in
we'll,
June.
essentially,
One
we
for
have until
summer.
the end of the second meeting in June if we decide to, to put any changes on the ballot for this 2020 election. So I don't know how the council would like to proceed with this. I know we already have a lot of meetings scheduled, and, I leave it up to the council, the council members.
So for my opinion on some of this, I'm open to having a couple of workshops just to discuss or make known some ideas regarding some amendments to the charter. Obviously, when we changed the form of government, a lot of things came with that, so all part of a learning curve. So we found there are things that need to be revised or relooked at. Again, I guess we could submit suggestions to council for writing them up and then discuss them as a whole, or just provide them to council and take votes on them. However the council wants to move forward is fine with me.
I'm in favor of a workshop myself, so for that purpose.
Me too.
Sure. Yeah. I think a workshop and then concurrently a timetable, so we don't get caught up and say, well, we run out of time, we can't, we need to, I'm in favor of that.
So, Councilman, did you want to come up with a date now, or did you want to hold off and make a suggestion later on?
I suggest that we can at least have a date planned for at least the first meeting. If we want to start February, that's fine with me. Well, let's get through this first month of the year. If you want to do it in January, I'm open to any date that works for all of us. I would say February, so we can at least have enough time to submit our ideas and questions to council, and then that we,
Beginning of February sounds good to me as well. I
Madam
don't know
Clerk,
about
is there any
anybody else's
dates that-
schedule, but just keep in mind, as far as time is concerned, that it wouldn't be any earlier than 7 p.m. only because of, yes.
An agreement?
And maybe it could be done on an off week when we don't have a meeting as well.
So the school committee meets on the second Tuesday, correct?
Second and fourth.
And yeah, many times and most the 4th as well.
How
We
about-
could always do an off day, it doesn't have to be a Tuesday, right? It could be,
Right. How about the 26th of February? Is that too far out?
What day is that?
That
What's a
would be a
Wednesday?
Wednesday. We would be safe from any other
Yeah.
school committee meetings and
Sounds
court.
No
sounds good to me right now.
Yeah.
Ask me another month. No, that's, let me make sure. Yeah, that should
I
be
think
fine.
proactively doing it, a meeting maybe every other month, will give us sufficient time to discuss some of our concerns, put things into questions. At the end of the day, we can formulate a list of different changes that we may feel are pertinent, and then take votes on them, whether or not they make it onto the ballot.
Mr. President, if the date's okay with you, I would make a motion that we hold that first workshop on February 26th at 7 p.m. here in council chambers. If for some reason we can't, we could go upstairs, but Mr. Solicitor.
We can just set the date. I don't want you to have a vote on it because it's just listed as discussion only. So,
Okay.
So
So,
So I suggest that date, if it's okay.
but more importantly, if we can, if Madam Clerk, if you could just confirm that municipal court or anything else isn't scheduled
Of course.
during that time here for one reason or the other.
Sure.
I don't know if somebody had changed their date, if school department or...
And it should be advertised, right?
correct. The clerk will have to post it 48 hours beforehand. We'll come up with an agenda item to the extent that you want to talk about specific items or specific topics that you want to address to the charter. Please let us know. Otherwise, it'll be a very general meeting. But I think between the assistant solicitor and myself, that should give us enough time, even if you just want to call us and say, hey, can you look into this for us? Can you look at some language on this?
Okay.
Maybe we can get something together so you'll have a more meaningful meeting when you get there.
So can I be so bold as to suggest, I know that we've all been through that thing a million times and live it. Maybe we can even, send ahead to, the city clerk, individually what we're thinking, so as to, to Mike's point, we make it as detailed as possible. People know, what they want to come and listen to or what they're coming to listen to, and we don't duplicate agenda items. I think that might be.
Sounds good to me. Okay. Any other further?
So when do you have to advertise, Madam Clerk, for the 26th? When would you, is it 48 hours? So before that point, we should all contact the city clerk with our suggestions, so you'll have time to put it in the ad, I would think.
It doesn't need to be advertised.
It doesn't need to be advertised, just the agenda needs to
Through
be
the
posted.
SMS.
Okay.
Just through the Secretary of State.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, very good. Thank you. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is discussion of short-term rental ordinance / amendment zoning. Councilman Morato.
So we all have the draft on that ordinance. Assistant Solicitor Dillon will guide us through a little bit. There's some further language that needs to be, I guess, reviewed by zoning on this. So if you can explain that.
Sure.
Dylan?
Procedurally, whenever you go to amend the zoning code, you need to have advertisement, you need to have posting of it, it needs to go out to planning for a recommendation, then it comes back to the council. But for our purposes, this is just a discussion. This helps me get an idea of what everyone on the council thinks about the issue. This is modeled off of the way the city of Providence just passed their Airbnb ordinance. The enforcement mechanism is through a temporary use permit. So in order to operate an Airbnb, you need to acquire a temporary use permit. That gives the city identification of where Airbnbs are operating. The restrictions on where they can be placed in terms of zoning are proposed to be, you can only have an Airbnb in a residential zone if the owner lives there. So in a multifamily, an owner could rent out the other units in an Airbnb, but in a single family, they could only rent out bedrooms. So you wouldn't have a case where a single family in a residential district was being posted on Airbnb. But in commercial districts, you would be able to have Airbnbs in which the owner is not present. The reason for that is some pretty straightforward nuisance approach. The city of Providence has been using this. They passed the law about a year ago. They began enforcing it a few months ago. It requires some health and safety standards, guarantees that there's a present certificate of occupancy, that there's a map of exits, that there's a fire extinguisher. One of the main things that would occur from an enforcement standpoint is if an Airbnb is operating illegally, it's very easy to check. You can just pull up the address and cross-check whether or not you have a temporary use permit on file. So from an enforcement standpoint, it's relatively simple to pull off. There's no real additional fees or anything to that extent. It's straightforward in the sense that if you have the temporary use permit, you're up and operating. The only way in which it's not straightforward is that you need to pick a date of implementation. You need to give people some warning about when this will start, because people book Airbnbs sometime out in advance. So if we pass this ordinance on a Monday, I would recommend you'd give them a little further out than Tuesday before you begin enforcing it. Otherwise, a bunch of people would have their bookings canceled. But that would be the only thing that's of my immediate practical concern. If there's other issues that you want me to address in the ordinance, I'd be happy to.
So, just a quick question. So what are we waiting for as far as zoning with this ordinance? What's the holdup with zoning?
There's no holdup. So in order for this body to have a first and a second passage, you need a recommendation from planning first. So a zone change first goes to the council, is then sent out to planning. There's advertising. That's about 3 weeks, I believe. Subsequent to the advertising, you have first and second passage.
So I have a question on the language here. So you just mentioned in a residential zone, owner occupancy is necessary, but in a commercial zone, it is not, but it's not defined in here that that's not the case. So would it be in the best interest of us to write that out so that people don't assume or there isn't any?
Sure, we can do that.
Or in the absence of it not being there, we're saying that they don't need to have owner occupancy?
Correct.
Okay. And when we're mentioning about operation, consideration for police and fire may vary. Do they have to have a permit from the police department or the fire department or an inspection done? What are the requirements that they may require prior to getting this, if there are any?
So there are none. Nothing additional than a certificate of occupancy for any dwelling unit. So if it's safe for a person to dwell in there long term, then the assumption is that it's safe for a person to dwell there on a short-term basis. So there's no distinction between long and short-term dwelling unit regulations in terms of fire and police.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. President.
Please.
And I'm sorry, were you done,
No, I'm good.
Councilwoman? Dylan, I don't know what your thoughts are to this end, or if you've even given it any thought, and certainly a zoning ordinance doesn't seem like the place to address it, but with regard to, I think that there are probably concerns that go along with short-term rentals that don't go along with longer-term rentals, like lease agreements and things like that. What immediately comes to mind is, like noise complaints, or folks who might be a little bit more willing to kind of raise hell because they're only going to be there for a short period of time than people that, actually live there and have to deal with the neighbors, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Are there any common provisions or, is there anything that we can do to address, maybe by way of licensing, certain things that may take effect if, people were to be, repetitive violators, or folks were to, repeatedly lease or rent, short-term to people who are kind of raising Cain in the neighborhood?
Yes. So I believe the way this functions is it allows for the removal of the temporary use permit. So the second they lose the temporary use permit, you can't rent out short-term rentals anymore. And it's a relatively low standard because you're granting an additional benefit for them to even be entitled to have a short-term rental at all. So I believe it functions with the zoning officer. If I can refer you to Section 19103, subsection A3. A temporary use permit may be revoked at any time by the zoning officer. So it's not a board. You don't have to wait a month. People are really, a temporary use permit is just that, temporary. It's a grace that the city is giving the owner of the building in order to do this, so they can lose it for violations just like you described.
And is there a concern that that might be too arbitrary or too simple? I mean, I don't have a feel one way or the other, I guess.
Any administrative decision by a zoning officer can be appealed to the zoning board.
Okay.
And the zoning board can then consider it. It's, I believe, a 3-person vote to overturn the zoning officer.
Okay.
That's not in here, but that's a general principle of all zoning administrative decisions.
Yep. Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
And at any point, if a resident or a business owner doesn't agree with zoning opinion, do they have any other outlet that they can petition?
They can appeal to the zoning board. If they disagree with the zoning board opinions, they can appeal to Superior Court.
Okay.
The standard to the zoning board is relatively straightforward. It's, if the zoning board members believe there's an error, the appeal to Superior Court is slightly different. It's deference to the zoning board members. So likelihood of success when appealing a zoning official decision is relatively low, but that's not to say it's impossible.
Any other further questions from the council?
So, Dylan, what will be the time frame with these additions?
I can work with the clerk on getting it posted and sent over to planning. I'm not sure what the meeting schedule is, 2-3 months.
Okay, because as you said, some of these rentals are probably going to start picking up or booked, and we just want to be fair to them also,
In terms of actual enforcement, I would suggest further out than 2-3 months, but that's not an obligation. It's just a suggestion out of the reality of the fact that people have already booked out for some time period. I say 2-3 months because you need 3 weeks advertisement, and then you need a planning meeting, which I believe only occurs once a month, and then you need 2 council meetings, which essentially occur about 2 times a month. So when you start to stagger all those things and line up, the time period just stretches out.
So by then, we'll have an idea as to when we should put an effective date on it.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Moving right along to the next item, please.
The next item is item number 4, discussion on capital improvement projects, Hunts Mills Dog Park and Jones Pond. Council President Brito.
So this here is a follow-up to the previous meeting that we had on December 17th. And during that time, it was brought to our attention by the administration that both the dog park and Jones Pond was not approved by the council as a capital improvement. As we went back and took a look at the video, the council did vote on that. As far as I'm concerned, and I don't think anybody up here has any objection, because we said clear out that it was part of the capital improvement project, and I would just like to see at this point in time that these 2 items be incorporated into what we have already that's existing for capital improvements that was approved during the 2019 budget discussion. I don't know if we need to have Malcolm come up at this time. I'm not going to request you to come up, but I personally would just like to see that be inclusive to the capital improvement program, or projects, I should say.
And I just wanted to add, I know the city clerk provided us with an updated copy of the 2020 budget, so I'm going to, since we've received it tonight, I'll be able to take a look at it tonight, later on, tomorrow, because I'm interested in looking at the numbers comparatively, knowing that these 2 items, being told by administration that they weren't approved, knowing well and full-heartedly that we discussed it and we made a vote. I have also found some other discrepancies in our meetings regarding votes of approval throughout the budget process that do not reflect in what supposedly was the budget. So I'm going to be referencing the departments based on what the video and the vote of the council is compared to what the administration has printed and said that they thought was approved or not approved. So there's some discrepancies that are going to be brought up. Once
Okay,
I've-
if you could send those over, we can look into it. As far as the other two, we had a discussion in the mayor's office earlier today with the solicitor, the assistant solicitor, the mayor, the director of planning, myself, Mr. Luba, I don't know if I missed anybody, as far as exactly how this works in the budget process and what wasn't approved, and we couldn't come to a consensus. So I think the solicitor and assistant solicitor, we're going to look into that a little bit and come up with exactly how that was defined. There's some ambiguity in the language as far as how you could read it.
Mr. President, can I ask? I'm sorry. What was it that you couldn't come to a conclusion on, the fact that it was voted on or not voted on, or?
It was the understanding that the original budget was $3.69 million. At the first public hearing, the council voted to say put in another $100,000 to get to $4 million. When it came to vote on it, the 3.69 was voted on, not the $4 million. So the question was, how does that work? Because the 3.69 was the original one. So was it, if you tried to include those, which ones came out? And so that was kind of the basis of the discussion, that the extra $100,000 would have brought it to, say, $4 million, but the vote was for the 3.69.
The 3.9, if I'm not mistaken, was proposed, not approved.
It was
advertised.
3.6 million.
I'm sorry?
3.6 million.
3.6 was proposed.
We never approved to add money to the capital improvement project. We never discussed that.
What's the 100,000 that was approved?
Jones Pond, the dog park, the few items that the council had put in at that, I don't know if it was a workshop or the first public hearing.
So there were changes like the fire. They had requested $40,000 for equipment. We actually made it $80,000 for grant matching. So that was a change that was done to the budget. And you had made multiple remarks saying that, well, if you're changing here, then we have to take away from there. But we never approved the capital budget as presented as a whole. We were going item by item and choosing. And we never went through and approved every single item. So.
And so, say half of them were approved.
Right.
And then, so the question was, what was actually approved? Was it the original one? It was really just the $2 million of the $4, and the other $2 is still up for discussion?
Right, so what was approved was what we physically voted on as being approved. So if we didn't take a vote to approve, say, like the skate park, we never voted to approve the skate park. So the funding for the skate park is money still sitting in the capital budget as a potential project, still pending.
Defer to the solicitor and the assistant solicitor on that one.
Say that again?
I'll defer to that's one of the things we were looking at.
In addition to that, we had a running tally of what was approved and what wasn't. So that should have been available right at that point in time, because as we were approving, you were updating your spreadsheet. Right at that moment, it was live right at that moment. So if we approve the skate park, if we approve the dog park, any of those things that we approved, you were recording at that point in time. I just I don't understand where the confusion comes with the dog park and Jones Ponds when we was discussing.
Or anything, for that matter, if we were documenting while we were making
Mr.
those.
Solicitor?
I was not at those meetings, as you might remember, so I'm going to defer to Dylan on that, and he might give you a better explanation.
Okay.
The discussion we had this evening, this afternoon, raised a couple of different theories on what actually occurred. Now, what I have not had the opportunity to do, because this conversation occurred about 2 hours ago, maybe 3, is to review the video and to kind of track exactly what motions were held, et cetera. But philosophically speaking, and I'm a bit reticent to do this, but to try to answer the question to the best of my ability, the question is, would you vote on the capital budget that's distinct to other sections of the budget? Because in the other sections of the budget, you can't say exactly what does or does not happen. So there's essentially two sets of votes when you're thinking about capital funds. There's the total amount of money that will be spent, and then there's the individual projects that make up that amount of money. The question raised today by other members of the administration was the vote on the total amount of funds. Did that include the projects that were specified underneath that total amount of funds? Or is the council approving the project separately? What happens to the funds that the council did not vote on individually? So if you voted on, let's say it's a $4 million budget, and you approve $3 million worth of projects, what happens to the other million? Right? And so when you look at the charter, the way that the capital budget operates is distinct from all of the other departments. And exactly how that functions in this case was the debate this afternoon. And when I say debate, I mean purely verbal, first blush, no opportunity for research, no opportunity to review the record. So I'm not giving you anything hard and fast in any way, shape, or form. I'm just trying to convey to you what the concerns were that were presented, and I believe the finance director was touching upon. I wish I had more, but this was just brought to my attention sort of ad hoc.
Sure. But the individual amounts that we had approved is equal to the total amount. So whatever the total amount was, it came from the individual votes that we had for each line item.
They may very well be. I don't know.
I don't see any other way around it, to be quite honest
We have
with you.
roughly $1.3 million left that we have not discussed in projects.
And therefore, we weren't spending that $1.3 million.
It's still there. We have not discussed those
It's there.
items.
It's just there. We're not spending. The 3.6 was proposed. Didn't necessarily mean that we were going to spend the entire amount. That was just proposed by the administration. You know, if we decided to spend $1 million of that 3.6, then the remaining balance just sits there.
Correct. The follow-up question is, it sits there until when? Does it sit there until the next budget cycle? Does it sit there until
the next budget cycle?
Or another resolution comes forward? You know, let's say someone gives you the opportunity to buy a money tree, but they need $200,000 out of the capital budget by next week. Do you have the ability to introduce a resolution to purchase the money tree, even though it wasn't allocated in the budget? So it's a bit of these more philosophical and hypothetical questions. And again, I'm reticent to say exactly what did or didn't happen because I need to review the record. I mean, we were on our about 10th night consecutively, going 4 or 5 hours in. I want to be careful about what was voted on and what wasn't voted on.
Sure. No, I understand. And that's why I continuously had asked for a list of those items that were approved and the dollar amount that was approved so we can get ahead of this and not be in a position that we're in right now.
I have every confidence that the record is clear. I just haven't had a chance to review the record.
So, Mr. President, if I can, well, here's what's clear to me. We haven't gone over the amount that was suggested, the 3.6 million. There were monies left from years ago because projects didn't get approved or voted. So the question about what do you do with the money that's left?
Yes.
Well, we had some that was left from before. So that night we were dealing with about a 3.6 million total that we could spend up to. We know we didn't. We're some million something below that. So the question on the agenda tonight by the president is, there are two items. Did we vote for them or not? That should be clear to everybody. And I know, you have to look at the video, but I know Malcolm was doing a good job that night of keeping a running tab, but you can't tell us if those two items were approved or not? And I'm not, that's the basic question that we're at right now. And it's not going to put us over anything. So bottom line is we want these two projects.
When we went through the line by line, there was, say, half of the projects that were approved and voted on. At that last meeting, the dog park and the Jones Ponds were not voted on at that last meeting. And so that's the ambiguity.
So
At that very last meeting, but how about prior to that? Just like some of the other items that were first on the list that was approved.
And it's my recollection is that the council had voted to, per the charter, if the council is going to add any items, they can't add it they have to re-advertise and then approve it at the following meeting. So in the first meeting, you voted to put it on the next agenda to be approved. The problem is at the next meeting, those specific items weren't approved, just like the other 1.3 wasn't.
Is
I
it,
have a hard time believing that.
No, that's not what transpired. I sat in these meetings also, and I kept a running tally of, I'm $26,000 off, and I forgot the reason why in this whole calculation. And I don't understand why we keep having this conversation. It's going to be a long budget season coming up if we continue this way. So my suggestion would be, right, since no one can recollect as far as, even though it's recorded in minutes, can we just resolve this through resolution? And none of us voted on adding additional monies, by the way, to that capital improvements projects. What we did was take money from the remaining money and say we're going to reallocate $3,500 for the wire drop, which we did through resolution, $6,000 for the dog park, and $75,000 for Jones Park. But we never discussed adding another $100,000 to the $3.6 million. Never. That was never a discussion. So if this can be resolved once and for all through resolution, I suggest we just do that.
Well, we resolve this week, and for the next meeting, I can report on it. So we don't go on any further to lengthen this conversation that we're having this evening. Let's talk about it this week and have a reporting for the next meeting.
Mr. President, I have one question, and you may not be able to answer this for either Mike or Dylan. Maybe you can take back and think about it. But Section 4-10 of the Charter says it's unexpended appropriations. All appropriations shall lapse at the end of the budget year to the extent that they shall not have been expended or lawfully encumbered. So my question as we're working through this, and it's a related one, is how do previously approved capital projects, which have not gone out for RFP, have not been begun, how do funds that were allocated for those apply going forward? We know that we have a substantial number of those. I would be interested in seeing whether projects that were at one time approved, would there be an appetite for taking a look at those again? Would there be an appetite for putting those monies to better use or, more, based on the current issues? So as we kind of think through this issue, may I ask you to think about that, and maybe at the next meeting we can discuss how that applies.
If I may address that through the chair.
Please.
I have the way the budget functions in the charter, there's a lot of interrelated and overlapping pieces. So I think, to your point, an opportunity for myself and the solicitor to sit down and write a memorandum really kind of explaining this, how this interacts in this circumstance, this is what should be followed, and then a second memorandum addressing exactly what did or did not occur on the record from the votes that evening. Then we have the set of rules that are controlling, and then we have the facts on the ground. Then we can be definitive. Until then, it's difficult to say, yes, this is exactly how that worked, this is what happened that evening, because they overlap, and it's quite complicated. I really do need time to sit down with the record in front of me, with the charter in front of me. I have no doubt that I can get you a very clear answer. I have no doubt that the record is clear. But what I don't have is the full record and all of the charter sort of memorized sufficient so that I can speak to it this evening.
And when do you think you can have that information to us?
When do you need it, Mr. President?
Well,
Yesterday.
9 o'clock?
the end of this week?
No problem.
We're good with that. My last comment is, isn't this just about looking at the record if some are saying that these two items now, forget the budget philosophy and planning, but regarding these two items, we look at the record, who made the motion, who seconded it, and what was the vote. That shouldn't take too long, right, to find out. We have written minutes, and we could look at the video, fast forward to that point of the meeting. Isn't that what it would clear up
I think
this immediate concern?
with the video and a bowl of popcorn, I could get it done in about 45 minutes. But as to, so if I can tell you exactly what happened, let's say it was voted on, done, no questions, right? It stays underneath the budget threshold. Let's say it wasn't voted on. Can you do a resolution tomorrow? That's a different question. Let's say you're already at the budget threshold, but you want to use funds that weren't spent from the previous year. Do you need a resolution that's effectively a budget transfer to move those funds into one of these projects, as opposed to just voting for the project in a silo? These are all questions that I would like to answer so that we don't get down the road and find out that we haven't allocated the funds appropriately.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, you have more to add to this?
No,
Okay.
I'm just up next, so.
Okay, all right. Next item, please.
The next item is special revenue accounts discussion. Council Vice President Rodrick.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. President, started this discussion a couple of meetings ago, and we wanted to have some time to research. I'll try to just be quick and go through a list here. What I'm talking about is what is called the special revenue accounts. And as if I'm understanding it correctly, these are items that are not in the regular budget book, not appropriated to the regular budget process. They were in a special revenue account. Now, there were several more, but I just picked out a few. I believe I sent this to the council earlier this week, so you should have these also. And I have 8 items, and none of this is intended as a negative inquiry right now. I'm just trying to find out what these are, is the money there, and understand it better. The total of these 8 items is $1,652,010. So, for instance, I'll bang through these quickly. Number 1 says Project DARE, that the balance as of October 31st, 2019, was $9,763. So, is that the Project DARE of the past that we no longer have? That was the police schools program, which city has not operated for years, or is it something else?
It is something else, and I've got some history on most of these. Most of these go back 15, 20 years. So it's possible it may have started out as DARE, but some of these have morphed into, since it's DARE, drug, awareness, resistance, education. It has really been used in conjunction with, and I have a little packet I was going to give each one of you. I broke the copier, so I don't have enough, but I can give it to you after. I've got 4 copies. But it's used with the substance abuse, the substance abuse grants that we get in. And this money hasn't been used in a couple of years. We had a coordinator, Jennifer Wall, who did a great job, but she stopped working for us a few years ago. It's just started up again. I went back a few years, and they were using this money for underage drinking and tobacco use. So they've got 2 grants out there that they were using. I think it would be best, since you brought this up, and I researched it, is I move all of that under the substance abuse grant, just to make it a little more.
Okay, so to save time, this money probably started out as that original DARE program and has morphed into these other programs, which are meritorious. I'm familiar with them, and they're good programs. Jen does a good job with that. I would suggest we don't call it Project DARE anymore. Under special accounts, we could call it something more current.
Correct.
All right, so moving to forfeiture drug state. $285,895. Is that different than the Google account? And
yes, and it's very similar. The Google account, you have federal forfeiture money and state forfeiture money. So what will happen a lot of times is, if we do some sort of a drug bust, and when we have funds, we can use those funds to pay for the drug bust. So we have funds, and we have state forfeiture money. So what will happen a lot of times is, if we do some sort of a drug bust, and when we have funds, we can use those funds to pay for the drug bust. So we'll put funds into an account pending a court case. And a lot of times we ended up sending it to the state or federal, and then we get our share back, which is kind of what happened with Google, except we didn't get our money up front. Of this 285, 261,678 came in last year and really has not been appropriate yet. It should have been moved into an escrow account pending the court outcome. So if you subtract that, we've got about $24,000 in the state forfeiture. We've got the Google money, which is, I don't know, we have 8-9 million still to draw down on that. But in the state, we have a little bit of money. And I did go in and print up, and I can give you this in the package. Like last year, we had, I don't know, 10 or 12, and it seemed like most of it, or the bigger ones, $1,000, $2,000, another $1,000, was for buy money. But this is all for the police department.
So it's all money, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, does that money stay within the police department?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Are there restrictions like the Google
yes.
account?
Yes.
Oh, there are restrictions for that? Okay.
And
So it's confiscated monies and goods and things that is not
So
in the
it goes-
budget,
yeah.
but...
And the court says, okay, the award is $1 million, and whoever's involved, the feds get their piece, we get our piece. Like with Google, we got 60 million, North Providence got 60, the state got some.
So with Google, we pretty much know what we do with it. Something like this, will we get just a summary sheet or a report as to what we did with the money? Is that just strictly in the police department and?
You can, normally, I think last year, there was only, what am I seeing, about $4,991 spent. And $4,000 of it was just, we give them cash for buy money. And so then they had a couple of small items, reimbursement for, you got advertising fees. Usually it's for the vice or the drug unit.
Could they use some of that money? I know the police station itself had some physical needs. Could they fix the building if it's police related?
But you could use the Google money for that.
Okay.
And the Google money was very specific. It could only be used for police purposes. We moved some of it into the pension, but then we have to separate out how much was police and how much was fire.
Right.
Because they didn't want it commingled and letting the fire department get part of that money.
Okay, the next one says Emergency Management Program, $90,989. I just didn't know what that was.
That we'll have to do a little more research on. We had an EMA coordinator who was here for quite some time, Wayne Barnes. He has since left. The director may have known, but she was here, Jean, she was here for 30 years, and then the acting has left. So that is money for the EMA program. There was a grant a few years ago. We met with the fire department today because they've taken this over. They're going to talk to RIEMA to see if they can find out specifically what this money was earmarked for. They have some ideas what they'd like to spend it on, but they have to make sure that it wasn't through a grant that had certain restrictions on it.
Okay. There was a donation to the senior center of $58,531. And by the way, again, for anyone here, one of my points is if we have this money, this $1.6 million, and there's more, I didn't get into all the accounts, it maybe would lessen burden on the regular budget in some areas.
Well,
and a lot of it is just to understand what it is. So like this senior center donation, who donated and what?
And again, it says donations, but it's actually, they get grants in. And so in this last year, they got $50,000 worth of grants in. They got $10,000 in legislative grants, $6,000 from the Department of Elderly Affairs, and then $34,000. And I can't get everything. And so the senior center gets this for, like you said, it helps the budget out. I do believe the $34,000 is they were using that for paid for part of the nurse in years gone by.
So a lot of this is grants. We don't have anything in our budget book that shows grants or revenue. Where do you keep all this information? You put this together. I appreciate that and sent it to us, but it wasn't in the budget book.
No.
So would it help next year if we had even if it's a page or two that lists special accounts or grants or other revenues? Or
We could give that on a separate page and list it. But if you get a grant in, somebody has written the grant for this specific purpose. So you can see it, but you can't say, oh, I want to do something else with it. So you like you said, you can see what it's for.
But to Councilman Roderick's point, can't,
Yes. And it's in the audit. I think at one point I was going to show you, and then I gave you the list of all the special
to
revenue.
Councilman Roderick's point, can some of these monies be utilized for budget items? Like, for example, if there was a grant to paint, the senior center, and you're asking for $100,000 in capital improvements, why can't some of that money come out of that grant?
Well, and that's what they're using. They have a nurse that had come in, and they were paying her out of one of these grants. And that legislative grant was $10,000, and so they buy like equipment with that money. So for that one, when they wrote it, it was to help the senior center for either payroll or equipment.
I think an important question with these different funds, it's how long has that money been in there?
Yeah.
I think that's a good
just
point,
have
right?
15, in some cases, 15 years.
And if it's been in there that long, why can't it be utilized?
Well, the account's been set up for 15 years, but money keeps coming in. Like, they get these grants on a regular basis, almost annually. So every year, like when we get into the hazmat grant, they which is further down, they apply for, and they've got a grant in 16, 17, 18, 19. So the money just keeps turning over. So how long has that money been in there? I can tell you how much it is, but most of it's pretty recent.
What's the hazmat grant entail? What's it for?
Well, if you want to take these in order, so we don't,
Yeah.
but that's a little bit down. That's for the fire department, and it is used for direct support of the fire hazmat team.
Is it like for training?
Can be used for training.
How much money is in that account?
95.
So we couldn't use that for some of the discussions that we had about training for the fire department?
Oh, that's one of the reasons. That's what I'm wondering, if we could use that. Now, it says these are balances as of October 31st. What I guess we don't know is what did they start out with? What was the original balance? So if there's 95,000 now in hazmat, the hazardous materials, is it? What did they start out with? Have they spent anything yet? I know one of these grants, when we get to it, we haven't spent anything yet by looking at the total. So that might be something for further research. There's 95,000 as of October 31st, but what did we spend up to that point,
And I believe that
if anything?
about, 60 of it came in this year for that hazmat.
I think for the next budget season, it'd be good for us to know exactly what's in these accounts. And then when you look at that budget proposal, as we had that discussion with the fire training, correct? Mm-hmm. We can at least ask and get an answer, can we utilize some of that money for some of that training?
I don't think you can. That's a different training. This is specifically for hazmat.
If it's whatever is specifically for, I think the point you're trying to make is whatever that money is specifically for an example, painting of the senior center. If you have a grant for painting of the senior center, we don't know that because we don't see this. But yet, on the other hand, you're proposing money to come out of capital improvement for painting of the senior center. And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just giving an example.
I understand.
And I think what the councilman is just saying is if we can have that list and we know exactly where that money's coming from, then we can avoid a whole list of questions that we have to these department heads because, hey, why don't you use the money that you receive for a grant? And I'm sure most of them do that anyway.
And I've got from the library 4 or 5 pages of what it is, and then I asked the fire department today to send me a little blurb over what they use their money for.
So to wrap it up, there are 3 left. Well, we talked about the hazmat grant. The carousel, Crescent Park Carousel, about $118,000 now as of October 31st. Now, we know they were before us looking for a lot more money than that, but what is that account?
There are 6 or 7, and I can run through them. They've got the charitable trust, $50,000. They've got a generic one called donations, $20,000. Fundraising for 23, Beer Fest, $1,400. Fundraising for the train was $1,000. restoration for Blount, where we put the Blount rent, 12,000. There's a little bit left in Island Grant, 400. So they broke it down into all these different categories. Now, I'd have to go, we'd have to get something from the carousel to see if any of those.
So I think these, when we were, Tracy was talking about it, when she came asking for assistance from the council, these are funds that the carousel committee tries to raise, exactly. So it's like their portion of contributing to the carousel, and then anything additional that they may need because their expenses are high in terms of restoration, they'll come and ask as a capital improvement project.
But again, even though, you know, they're a pretty effective committee, it's still, it's city property. It's something that we should know, you know, what have they, the monies that they raise, in addition to what they're asking the city taxpayers for.
And I think a conversation that we had months ago when we discussed boards and commissions, we had mentioned trying to get a hold of what each board and commission is doing, what they're providing the residents in the city. So one of the conversations I recall was having, you know, the chairs come to the council and give us updates on what they're doing in the Economic Development Committee. What advances are they making? How are they helping the businesses or areas in the city? What are they doing? I don't think that we haven't kept up with that, so to speak. I mean, we kind of were guns a-blazing, and then we got into the budget, which took up a lot. So it's something to look into and possibly request, you know, moving through the rest of the winter to see what's going on in the community so that we know what our commissions are doing and so that the public knows what the committee is doing. That way, if there's something that's interesting too, people who might be interested in one of those boards or commissions might come forward, because I know there are vacancies for different committees.
So I know the library donation fund here, the answer is probably similar. These are monies raised in grants and different things, and maybe, you know, next year's budget, we can look at it differently. But the Sabin Point Volkswagen settlement of $850,000. Now, that was the original amounts, actually, for the record, $849.33, $849.33, and that was that big lawsuit with Volkswagen, and it was to clean up the water and beach, specifically around the Sabin Point area. And questions are coming now from some residents, and also I know the state press, Providence Journal, who's been calling some of us in the mayor's office, because when people see that money sitting there, and then rumors got out, oh, the city's using that for other stuff. Well, that appears to not be the case, because we haven't used it for anything yet. So my question to that is, we have this $850,000 in a grant, which was a couple of years back. Is there anyone, and I don't know if it would be for you, Malcolm, but is there a timetable? When are we going to start this cleanup? Or where is the money sitting, and is it getting interest? What's the plan for that?
Well, I know the award was maybe 2 years ago, but we received the money on 12/12/18. So we've had it just about a year. And again, I think that was going to be in conjunction with planning, who was going to handle the majority of that. But then again, we've had turnover in planning. Mr. Fazioli just came in, so I could probably ask him to write up something, maybe for to send along, so you have an idea of what the plan is for that. But I think it's because of the turnover just been sitting there for the last year.
Is there any restriction on how soon we have to use it? You know, sometimes you get a grant, if you don't use it by a certain point, you got to send it back.
I don't think that's this case. I think this is more of an award.
Okay.
And
yeah, at some point, I don't think it has to be the next meeting, but maybe within the next couple of meetings, if we could get an updated report. I don't know, Mark, if you could work on that too. And that kind of concludes questions I had in these special accounts. And
I just want to add, I believe this whole conversation started over the fireworks, if we remember. And then, you know, we had that lengthy discussion.
Live Nation.
And then we found out that there was money sitting in Live Nation that could be, and then we changed it specifically for that purpose. So I think for the next budget season, it would help us out if we knew how much money is in each of these accounts, and maybe a little description as to what they can be specifically used for. You know, because there are some restrictions on these, and, you know,
Correct.
and I know you can't just use these for other things, but I think just a,
Can we add that to the ordinance?
And I know in the back of the audit, there's a little one-line description of what the subject matter is for each grant. These are listed in the back. I can tell you how much. As far as the restrictions, we'll probably have to reach out to the departments to get that information.
okay, that's all I have.
If I can add one more thing, and it's not on here, so don't expect an answer now, Malcolm, but while you're thinking about this, if I recall, several years ago when we had lost the middle school sports to the Budget Commission's discussion, there was an item on East Providence tax bill to check if you wanted to donate an additional amount specifically for middle school sports. I'm not sure how that was disposed of. I know we eventually got middle school sports back due to the activity of a number of people in the community, but I don't know if that revenue still exists or that fund still exists or in any way, shape, or form.
That fund doesn't, but what's happened is every year on the tax bill, I believe it's been brought to the council through the manager or the mayor as far as what you'd like to put on it. At least, and so we did, I think it was high school band uniforms at one time, and we did, and then the last year it was for
Veterans. I think we
veterans.
did.
Right. And so what happens is when the money comes in, there could be a few dollars left in each one of those, but, you know, on a quarterly or so, every so often, I send the money out to the parties that are denoted. But it's an annual. So after the first year, unless there's some sort of residual there shouldn't be any more money coming in.
Okay.
So I just want to add one thing, having discussed about the revenue and grants that we're not readily available to us, that we don't know because the departments are doing them. In the ordinance that we're formulating for the budget, if the Assistant Solicitor Connolly could add some wording that mentions that the council is aware of what the annual grants are that have come in, a small blurb of what they're allocated for, just as a reference point so that we're aware of things that are happening and monies that are coming in and being used for certain projects, so that we're, again, not allocating on additional funds to projects or line items such as repairs that are already funded through a grant that was sought and awarded.
Any other further questions at this time? No further questions? Thank you, Mr. Moore. Appreciate your time. Next item.
Okay, next
We're on
item.
item 6.
Yes, item number 6 is Wachamoket Community Meeting, Wednesday, January 15th, 2020. Council Vice President Rodrick.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. President, this actually specifically is not my item. I think we converged it a little bit with an item later on the docket about a traffic study in this regard. And what I'd like to do to try to save time for the meeting, if there's no objection, just to clean this up quickly, combine those two discussions, because I'm not prepared now to ask my colleagues to vote on the traffic study. I'll explain why, but I can clean it up now and get rid of both of those items, if there's no objection to that. And basically, and I talked and worked with Councilwoman Souza, and I know we're all concerned about all of the city, but there's so much life and vibrant activity going on in Wachamoket Square, and this is a good thing. And from what's going on with Live Nation to the new businesses opening up in the area, the Black Duck Tavern, the expanded exposure of the 133 Club and Restaurant, the Comedy Connection, the Oddfellows Home, and we're classing all of this as the gateway to the East Providence waterfront. We're getting a lot of traffic. So at this intersection, which is kind of a five-way, it's not a classic four-way intersection. There's a convergence of pedestrians from the bike path, bicyclists as well as people walking. There's a lot of car traffic. There's the new Waterfront Drive. There's the Valley Street coming under that bridge, and that's the only stop sign there. And this was already up for discussion, but I talked with the management at the 133 restaurant when, as I think most of us know from the news, a car went right over the median and smashed into the building. That part that they hit is a part of the sidewalk where generally a lot of people stand at night when they take a break and they come outside from the music. And this was a slow Monday around the Christmas break, so there weren't a lot of people, if any, standing out there at that time. Had there been the usual 10 to 20 people standing outside, somebody would have been hit by this car straight on. And the club owners have said to me, we've been concerned for some time. We don't like the new traffic flow. They've actually lost parking spaces. That whole area, I think, when we bring thousands of people into the area, we've got to just rethink the design. And so I had asked to do some kind of a traffic study, and I know Bill Fazioli, Jim Moran, they said, well, maybe before we do that, let's get some options together. So they had put together this public meeting, which I'm going to try to go to, but it's been advertised, I guess, on social media, and it basically, where's the date here?
15th of January.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Tockwatton.
Wednesday, January 15th, from 4 to 6:30 p.m. at the Tockwatton home, the Tockwatton long-term care facility. They've been very cooperative. They're part of this whole waterfront district, too, and they have a beautiful community room there, and they've offered to host the meeting. And I've been told that for people at work, you can still come later on, that they're going to just start talking around 4:30, but they'll be there later on. So I don't think there's a need tonight then to get a formal traffic study, which could cost a lot of dollars, and we don't yet have the plan, so I might have been too quick on that. So basically, that takes care of both of these areas, and I know I have had a lot of calls about the bike path. A couple of people call me all the time, like, when are you going to do something? We come down the bike path and cars aren't stopping. The whole area it's a good problem to have. It's a thriving area, and we just need to keep up with the traffic. And I know Councilwoman Souza's had some concerns there, and I would defer it to you at this point.
So thank you for bringing this up and putting it on the docket again. As most residents know, this is an ongoing topic at the council meetings and throughout the community. Different suggestions have been brought up by myself and others. I really think it's incumbent upon us as a city to really keep pushing the state to also get involved. We have a lot of tractor trailers that come down that road. We're diverting traffic from Rumford and Massasoit to Waterfront Drive, and in doing that, so that we're not putting extra burden on the side streets in the community, like Summit Street, Walnut Street, Vine Street, which causes a lot of backup because they're trying to get on to Taunton Avenue or the highway. We're trying to encourage people to take Waterfront Drive. So then that, again, lends to higher traffic, more vehicles coming down those roads, which we expect and we want because there's good, easy access to the highway, and it doesn't cause a traffic jam or backup. But with that comes high safety issues and concerns. I've talked to those business owners for the last 2 years. I've sat and watched near accidents and accidents occur frequently, unfortunately, because of the way that traffic pattern is. I think it's a multiple things that we need to do. I think coming down the bike path, again, those bicyclists don't stop coming down, which you would expect when you're coming to cross a road that you would stop, but I have seen them just kind of barrel through, hoping that there are no vehicles coming in. If you're going fast and those vehicles are coming fast down without any signal, it's near misses quite frequently. I'm really going to stick to, I think we need to have these speed bumps. There are plastic portable ones, rubber ones that can be moved in the wintertime for plows if it snows, so they're not a nuisance and they're not permanent fixtures, so they can be moved. That will help at least with the slowing of the vehicles coming down that intersection. Perhaps a light for the cyclists coming down, flashing, letting them know, caution, there is a busy intersection coming across. I think instead of the city doing a resolution for our own traffic study, I think it's incumbent upon the state, since they have to be involved in this redirection also, because there's going to be redevelopment of that area, continuing the bike path down First Street, which doesn't have even a sidewalk as far as safety or designated bicycle lane that I've been asking for. I think the state and should get involved, and so maybe a resolution, if we could draw one up, write one up for RDOT to take a look at that in addition to some of the other high safety locations in the city, I think would be important.
Can I add to that? So the bike path, the vehicles have the right-of-way, and there's stop signs for the pedestrians and bicyclists. However, we had an unfortunate event in Bristol last summer, I believe, where a 6-year-old child was struck and killed, which was a very unfortunate accident. And I believe that I don't see anything wrong with, even though the vehicles have the right-of-way at some of these intersections, as you're mentioning. And, like, for example, in Ward 4, you have Crescent View, which is, I believe, is a state road also. Is there any way that we can include some of these other locations in that resolution?
Yeah, absolutely.
If Councilman Cahoon has a bike path in his that has a main intersection and, Rumford or whatever, so we can do it all in one resolution. And then piggyback off of it.
Absolutely.
What was the name of your intersection?
Crescent View, where it crosses Crescent View. That's one of those busy intersections. Some of these intersections also, I think the DOT has cut back some of the brush to make it a little bit more visible for motorists, but I don't see anything wrong with them stopping at those intersections if it saves a life. So that's the only one I have in Ward 4 about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All set? All right, very good. Good conversations here. Moving on to the next item, number 7.
Item number 7 is discussion on juvenile hearing board regarding appointing authority, dates, and terms. Council Vice President Rodrick.
Just quickly, I don't know if Director Furtado has an update on that. I did speak with the mayor's office today about that, so we could probably move on from here. I know that they're looking into some legalities, and there was a request actually from someone from the school department side that wanted to sit on the juvenile hearing board, because it's the office that deals with students and truants that are sent to the hearing board. And the mayor's office, the mayor said, he had the same request from the person in the school administration. So there's some things they're looking into. I don't really have a lot to add tonight other than, we're still waiting for an update. I know we have vacancies, and I talked to a couple of the people whose terms are expiring, and they said they're around, but they really would like to see a new board put together, because they'll be around to help, but they're ready to move on. So I'd like to see us expedite it.
I know that we're still in the process of figuring out as far as the appointing authority and all of that, and Hopefully soon that will come to its conclusion. I would, if I may, make a recommendation to expedite the process once that conclusion is reached, to amend the ordinance so that the appointments don't have to be done on October 1st, I think is the date, so that we could get those vacancies filled as quickly as possible, so those people who no longer wish to serve can step down. But
Sam, do we have pending applications for that board? I think we do, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got, folks who'd like to get off, folks who'd like to get on. I think it'd be good if we could, swap them out.
And it's a mayoral appointment with council confirmation, or just straight? I'm still not fully aware of the whole charter change and some of these appointments.
I defer that to our legal scholars.
Well, we'll have to call one in. That's just a joke, Mike.
So what? No, but not to be flipped.
Oh, I thought
right?
Dylan laughing.
Not to be flip, but pending resolution of that question, which seems to be perplexing everyone. What if the council were to just take action and make an appointment?
Because it's a quasi-judicial board and they can affect the person's rights, the individual's rights, it's not a good idea to do so because it could be challenged at a later date. Say they give a person 50 hours of community service and the person doesn't do it. Then what's the result? They could say, well, the board didn't have the authority to give me that dispensation because they weren't validly appointed.
I see a hand raised from Assistant Solicitor. You want to add?
I concur, it's a bad idea.
It won't be my last. I got more bad ideas.
So, what is the holdup?
If there are, I don't really think, I'm not aware that there's a holdup. I mean, I think that the reality is that, first of all, the ordinance that says they only can be appointed on October 1st to me is ridiculous.
That's right. That's a problem.
Right. That's one of the first problems.
Yeah.
Right. So, but does that mean if someone resigns on October 2nd, we have to wait a whole year before they can be reappointed? To me, that makes no sense whatsoever. But that's what the ordinance says.
But is that the only discrepancy that's currently pending?
Well, then it's the appointment authority in general, and that's. I don't understand why the mayor cannot get the names and just submit a name to be put on the board. I mean, and we can deal with it.
Right.
Well, the October thing could be a problem.
It could be. I mean,
Can we just change that?
Yeah,
That part can be changed.
that could be part. Yeah.
So let's try to,
Let's put that on the agenda for next.
next meeting,
And can we take the action to get those names of those folks over to the mayor so he can start the consideration process there? And yeah.
I'm all set.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving right along to the last and final council discussion, item number 8.
Item number 8 is discussion of LED streetlight /PUC litigation update. Councilwoman Souza.
So a portion of this, if I may have our Assistant City Solicitor come up, a portion of this discussion is going to be continued for our next council meeting because of the updates. We'll probably sign that into executive session before, because it being in current litigation, we're not able to discuss that openly during the council regular scheduled meetings. But as the community is aware, back in 2017, the council put forth a resolution after many council discussions regarding energy-efficient LED lights, cost savings that were associated with that. We entered in, there was much conversation about costs, litigation, whether state we should be paying for the state lights. Currently, the city has stopped paying for state lights on state roads, though we are escrowing that money if it is, in fact, our obligation to pay that. But so that was one of the components, negotiating all of that. We did have an agreement with a company to purchase those lights. Council did give approval to move forward and purchase those lights, but because of ongoing litigation, that resolution was never put forward or took an action upon. My main concern, not only obviously always cost effective, looking for ways to save is always on the top of the agenda, but my real passion about all of this has to do with safety and the safety of the community and the safety of the residents. And I, along with many residents who call me on a weekly basis or monthly basis, discuss how unsafe they feel in the community because of how dark it is. The street lights, we have a majority of them that are either off or red capped or both. Just today, coming down Taunton Avenue, which is the mainstream of the city, and very busy with all the businesses and rush hour traffic, there were 6 lights off consecutively in a very busy zone on Taunton Avenue that had 3 pedestrian crosswalks. So if a resident is crossing the street to go to a vehicle, to go to the bank, because again, it was in that center right here down the street, right after City Hall, it is very dark, and it's noticeable when you're coming into the city that you have some dim lights, and then all of a sudden it's black. So that's a major issue and concern because within the last year we've had 7 pedestrian fatalities due to low lighting areas in the city. And so that's very concerning from a safety perspective. And I think it's important for the council, along with the administration, to address such safety issues. We have the winter now, so it is pitch black at about 4:30. We have students walking home from school and activities between the hours of 4 to 8 every night, whether they're going to the library, whether they're going home. That's a big problem, and we know speed is a factor in the city. Nobody can deny that people are speeding throughout the city, side streets, and then you come with that with no lights, these night lights that we're calling street lights. It's the perfect recipe for these disasters that are occurring more frequently than they have been in the past. So I am looking forward to hearing what the update is next week on where we stand in our litigation. And I know that there are multiple cities that are also involved in this. There may not be a quick resolve, but I'm looking to set a timeline because I don't feel comfortable with us continuing litigation for the next 5 years, hoping to get a better deal on pricing when we're risking the safety of our residents in the community.
Thank you. So I can address a few of those concerns.
Please.
I can address the history and current status as to what's already been filed and what are already public documents. We can have an executive session, have a more detailed discussion about what's going on presently in terms of what the city's drafting and what our positions are. But primarily, the first thing I want to address is to the extent that lights are turned off or that there is insufficient lighting at any given place in the city, this litigation is not upholding or refusing lights to be turned on. New lights can be installed. Any light that is off could be turned on. It will have no impact on this litigation one way or the other. And, I applaud your concerns regarding safety. One of the biggest components of our lawsuit is that because of actions taken by National Grid, the city is demonstrably less safe because we don't enjoy the benefits of these LEDs. And so there are 2 lawsuits. One is about the purchase and conversion, and I'm going to oversimplify just for the sake of giving an update. The purchase and conversion of lights within the city to LEDs. One lawsuit basically is saying that National Grid is forcing us to do impermissible things as a part of that purchase, and they're giving us an unfair price that they're essentially making up as a portion of that purchase. The second lawsuit is specific to lights on state roads. As it stands, National Grid sends the City of East Providence invoices for the state's lights. So the state's lights, actually, because of not just the size of the roads, but the increased wattage of the lights on state roads, takes 20 to 27% of the electric bill. So the state lights are a very large portion. Unfortunately, we can't separate the two lawsuits because the purchase of the lights requires us to purchase every single light within the boundaries of the city. That means that National Grid is trying to get the city of East Providence to purchase the state's lights. So if we do purchase the lights, we then have to pay for all of the state lights on state roads. So that's why they're tied together. The two individual lawsuits are their current status on each of them. The first is the purchase of the municipal lights. We had to go to DPUC for a decision. The DPUC refused to take a position on 2 of our 4 claims. On one claim, it denied the City of East Providence's position, and on another claim, it essentially said that the City of East Providence failed to show that it was injured. We have appealed that decision. That appeal has already been filed and briefed by the city in Superior Court. The Superior Court is waiting for National Grid to respond. The original National Grid response date is, in fact, Friday. They are requesting an extension. I'm going to assume the court will grant them an extension. Those extensions, 30 days is a good guess on an appellate briefing. So that's the status of that case. The other case, instead of the City of East Providence suing or being sued by National Grid directly, as you pointed out, there are other government agencies that have the same exact case. We were seeking to intervene. While we were not granted a right to intervene in that case, the judge did give us the right to file an amicus brief if there was any dispositive motions filed. What that means in non-lawyerese is we expect a motion for summary judgment, which could end the whole case, to be filed in the immediate future. While the City of East Providence is not a party to the case, we're going to be allowed to brief and argue. The outcome of that case will actually control and set precedent for the state lights within the City of East Providence. So the motion for summary judgment, let's say that that's filed within the next 2 weeks, 3 to 4 months, perhaps, on when we get a final outcome. That's a good time period for the state light portion of it. Win or lose the state light portion of it, it's worth much more money than the purchase and the conversion. So the two things, if the state light wins, it may have a different impact on what we end up doing with one case or another. And those are the sorts of details, because they're going forward and they're not on the public record, that I look forward to discussing in executive session. But that legal strategy is still sensitive at this time because of the way the cases interact with each other. And National Grid doesn't have any right to understand what we're going to do next.
Okay. All right, well, I appreciate that update, and I look forward to, so it's not, I don't want to, race through anything, because obviously I want the best outcome to be possible, but without extending it for an unknown period of time. We know National Grid is a conglomerate, and they could hold people in court for years. And the city, in my opinion, doesn't want to be in litigation for years when there are other issues in the community that need to be addressed, especially when it comes to safety and the well-being of our residents. So I appreciate your update.
No problem.
Thank you, Assistant City Solicitor.
Mr. President, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
just that one housekeeping item. We have an item on here, an ordinance for first passage for vote. Councilman Morado and I have discussed this. I think we're in agreement. We would prefer to have this introduced to the council for discussion rather than for vote tonight.
Correct.
So if possible, we'd like to move that item up into this section under communications, and we can forego any discussion under the vote.
That doesn't, I mean, just because it's listed as a vote doesn't mean you have to vote on it, so you could, it's up to you.
We could wait or do it now.
Correct.
And whatever the appetite for the council is, I mean, I propose we just get it out of the way now.
Sure. Any objection from the council?
No
No
objection.
objection from the council?
Councilman
proceed?
Morado, do you want to introduce this, or would you rather?
Could I just ask before you do this, so let's just do this, let's just table it for the first vote, and we're going to move it for discussion. So you're going to table it, because it's down for first passage, let's just table it
Would you like a vote for that?
Yes, please.
All right, so I move to table it for first passage and to instead have discussion.
That's fine.
Second it.
Can we read the ordinance
Sure.
that we're tabling for the record?
I'm sorry, the ordinance to be tabled is the ordinance in amendment of Chapter 2 of the revised ordinance of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended, entitled Administration.
I mean, I'm sorry, let's do can we do it this way? Let's get to the agenda item where it is. We're going to have a general discussion on it anyway at that, and we're just going to table it as first passage. That's the better way to do it because it's not under the discussion item right now.
All right, retract my motion. We'll discuss it when we get to it.
Sorry about that.
Nope, that's
We're
fine.
gonna have that discussion now?
No, we'll get to it when we come to that item there.
Okay, very good. Madam Clerk, next item.
Okay, the next item is reports of other city officials, Claims Committee report, City Solicitor Michael J. Marcello.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council President, members of the council, the City Council met at 7 o'clock as a Claims Committee on the following claims. The claims of Nicholas Leonardo and Valian Roca were referred to a vendor for consideration for payment. The water and sewer abatement charge of Eduardo Capella was tabled pending recommendation from the DPW director. And on litigation, the cases of J. Line versus Stephen Hazard, which are tax appeals, as listed, 3 tax appeals that were pending against the city. The City Council voted unanimously to settle those tax claims and authorize the mayor and the law department to execute a settlement agreement, which will become a public record once it's executed. And that is the extent of our report.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor.
Thank you.
Quick and to the point. Next item, please.
Next item is City Council meeting schedule for 2020. So this was just, the only thing that was amended from the December 17th, 2019 council meeting was the September 15th meeting. Actually, it was originally scheduled as September 22nd.
Does this require a vote?
Yes.
I move approval.
Second.
Roll call vote. Or do you want to read off the dates to the public first? Real
Would you
quick.
like me to read
You
it?
don't have to do it. I mean, it's up to you.
Would you
Okay.
like me to read 'em?
Roll call vote.
Okay. Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Would these need to be posted?
They will be posted on the Secretary of State's
Okay, very
website.
good then. That's fine. Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is under resolutions. The first is a resolution requesting that the East Providence City Council approve a traffic pattern study at Wachamoket Square, sponsored by
Table.
Council.
We can pass on that as we
Table
just table it. Move to table.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
All right, like the direction we're going in so far. Next item, please.
Introduction of ordinances.
It's about to slow up.
Well, this is the one that we had talked about for discussion, so I
So
think...
move to pass. Second, discussion. Once the discussion's over, you move to table, and you're done.
Move to pass.
Move to pass, second it, puts it in play. You're going to discuss the ordinance,
Okay.
and then after the discussion is over, you can move to table it. Doesn't mean, just because you move to pass it doesn't mean you're actually going to pass it. But you got to put it in play, right? So someone's got to second it, for motion to pass.
All right, so-
Second.
Well, we've never done that before
So
with the ordinance.
I move to pass for first
First
passage. The ordinance that I had previously read on the
I
record.
second that.
You receive?
So now, nobody vote, because we're going to
No, we're not voting. So now, a motion to pass has been seconded. Now the council president will open up for discussion on the ordinance, and that's what we're going to be doing right now.
So we got a motion to pass, we got a second, we need a roll call vote.
No, now we're
right?
discussing it. So now now's the time
Discussion
to
on the
discuss it.
motion.
Okay. All right.
Do you want me to start? Hey,
Please, Stu.
So as you know, this ordinance is to, I think back up, so with the new form of government, we've discovered that the time limits for our budget discussions has shortened significantly. So with this, there's it's to help the council give us the tools to properly go through the budget. One of the first changes that, per Assistant Solicitor Conley's recommendation, If you look under timelines and presentation and passages, and passage, the first section in accordance with East Providence, to strike the least 120 days prior to the end of the fiscal year, which, in his opinion, would be in conflict with a charter provision. If anyone has, so it's my recommendation that we strike that. If anyone has any comments.
I would go along with that. I think it's a clear opposition to the charter provision.
Under the second change on the B, the mayor shall submit to the council a budget and explanatory message to the council at least 90 days to 60 days. Changing that, I personally like 90, but in the spirit of compromising, I'm open to 60, if that's what the council feels.
So in discussing this with the Assistant City Solicitor when the council was going through the budget, and we knew that an ordinance had to be drafted. 90 days was something that I had told the city solicitor, the assistant city solicitor, that was something that I felt comfortable with. I still hold fast to feeling comfortable with the 90 days. As it stands currently, it's a 45-day advance notice, so going to 60 is giving us essentially 2.5, maybe extra weeks. I don't feel like 2.5 weeks is sufficient time to go through the budget and all that it entails to do our due diligence. I still think 90 days is an adequate amount of time for the council to be able to go through this. Certainly, the mayor can bring forth any other information. The budget does change throughout the process, and there is vast discussions. I think 90 days, in my opinion, I'm still steadfast on that number. I don't know how the rest of my colleagues feel about it.
Mr. President, I don't have a problem. I mean, it is 3 months, and things can change. So as long as we understand that we may be getting addendums or changes, or it's a long period of time. Not being a hands-on budget person, I don't know, but it seems to me like 3 months to have everything locked up. And
well, to me, the key being the presented prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year. So, I mean, the fiscal year starts, so we have to have, if we look at the timeline, we have to have things done 2 weeks prior to the end of the fiscal year. So that then cuts short that timeline of material that we're going to be reviewing. So that has to be taken into consideration also, because we don't really have those 14 days. We have to take final action 14 days before the end of the fiscal year.
So
That's 2 weeks less.
I think my concern with pushing it too far back, and I'm all for pushing it back, getting it earlier, kind of the whale in the room for the city's budget consideration is the school's budget consideration. Typically, the school cycle, which starts fairly early, is the workshops really convene at the end of June, early July, and the city sees the school budget by way of school committee approval sometime late August. We'll go back 90 days. 90 days takes us to August 1st. It's not going to be available. And the city's budget is going to have to be responsive to whatever the school's request is, for sure. Now, certainly, we could push back on the city, which might wind up with the city making a request to the school to kind of push back theirs. My concern there is that, if you push it back too far, then you're dealing with, essentially half a year's worth of data, which is probably not sufficient to be able to make decisions and votes. It kind of feels to me like 60 days, while still tight for us, is not as tight. I feel like, having gone through that process last year, if we were to implement a similar set of reviews, 2.5 weeks, no, not even 2.5 weeks, basically 15 additional days, would probably get us to that finish line and be able to account for, kind of the school process needing to go through what it needs to go through, and the city having time to kind of react to that.
Can I offer a compromise? Because 15, would I be comfortable with 90? Absolutely. Am I comfortable with 60? Yeah, I can go along with it, but it just is a little tight, especially with, advertising meetings and such. Would it be out of, reach to do another 10 days? So instead of 60, 70? Would that be unreasonable on either side? It just gives us another meeting, a potential meeting, scheduling another workshop or another meeting, So instead of 15 days, adding an additional 15 days to the 45 that's current, we'd be adding 25.
I mean, and to Councilwoman Souza's point, if we could get 180 days in advance, I'd love it, right? But I mean, it's like, the data's not available, can't perform it.
It's about the data.
Yeah, and in my experience, you want it real bad, you get it real bad, So I think we need to find that, whatever that, and I go back to the, if we push it back to, say, 70 days, and we go through the procedure again, and we say, boy, that really wasn't enough time, maybe we'd learn another 5-10 days or there at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, doubling the amount of time may be too much, too severe of a change in 1 year. I would support 70.
I would go with the 70, I think, and see how it works. And the 3-month thing I have a little concern with, and I know when you back up, to use the school department as an example, they had to change, and the state actually changed the law. It was causing layoffs, if you recall, because the school committees and the superintendent would say, okay, you want my data now, I'll give it to you, but I'm just going to send out layoff notices to almost everybody because we don't know. We can't predict. We need a little more time to do the data. That's kind of an example that I think could happen here. Not about layoffs, but about getting the data that we need. So I think a good start would be to go to 70 and see how it works.
I'm comfortable with that.
Keep in mind also, I mean, I had suggested early on about the capital improvement budget.
I was going to mention, I didn't see that on
That's
here.
In
on
the
the
event that we were to do that early on in the spring and complete that, that will be one portion of the budget that will not be inclusive to what we're talking about right now, that
So
we wouldn't need that amount
you
of
want
time.
to skip to that portion? Because there is some
Well, I mean, it seems like we have a general census of 70 days,
Oh, yes, correct.
first of all, so.
So just so you know, so we're taking this down as you're speaking, Dylan and I. We anticipate that once you get done with this discussion, it'll be tabled. We'll present you with a clean ordinance that gives the opportunity for the mayor's office to weigh in as well, and then you can go for it. We'll put it on the next agenda for whatever. Yeah.
My intention to table it once the discussion.
That's right, yeah, so,
Okay.
so I know, so there's not necessary to take votes as to 60, 70, whatever. We're writing this down. We get the
Well, at
consensus.
least now we know.
Exactly, that's what
And we're all on the same
Right, that's what we're-
level, and we don't have to
We're getting that.
revisit the same
Correct.
conversation and going over the dates again. So thank you.
I'm just going to skip to that, the capital improvement. So the idea behind this, I took this idea from a Concord, New Hampshire, where they, at the end of every fiscal year, they pass a resolution to review previous capital improvement projects, anything that came on the budget or they feel that shouldn't be a project anymore, they essentially close out those projects with that resolution. But instead of doing a resolution every year, it was on the advice of Solicitor Connolly to just include that into the ordinance, which that way now it's just automatic. And again, I see that the original 120 days out has been reduced to 90. And since we're in agreement with the 70 days for the actual budget, I don't necessarily oppose the 90 days. I just think adding just a little bit more time to that number would give us an opportunity to at least look at those capital improvement projects cross-reference with the request that we discussed tonight in regards to all those other funds. It just gives us a better picture going into budget season and discussions. So I'm not opposed to the 90 days, reducing it from 120 to 90. I leave that up to the council to decide whether or not you need a little bit more time or not.
Mr. Assistant Solicitor?
If I could just address that through the chair, the distinction between the 120 and the 90 days is there is already an ordinance in place that requires the planning board to make recommendations regarding capital expenditure. The 90 days more closely aligns with their process on when that occurs. The 120 days might end up being a little bit before that, so we may be putting the cart before the horse with that timeline. And to address the timelines more generally, another big portion of this ordinance is a quarterly meeting of a financial review committee, at least quarterly meeting, with the hope that there's more information flow regarding the financial status of the city between, staff, the administration, and the council on an ongoing basis. So hopefully, even at the 70-day window, we'll already be ahead of the game in comparison to where we were this first year after the charter change.
I'm comfortable with that explanation as far as the 90 goes. So, and then the other change that was brought up on the Section D, the Financial Review Committee, to add the planning director to that list. So it'll be mayor or designee, council president or designee, financial director, and then adding the planning director. Planning director is important key to this because of obviously the capital improvement projects and such. So.
Would that be number 4?
That would be.
Or would that be number 3 / finance director / planning director? That would be a 4th.
My suggestion is 4.
Okay.
Yeah, mine too.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 different departments. So.
Yeah, I mean, the idea being, if you don't have the mayor there, I mean, really, the members of his administration that he's sending, are sort of like, well, we got to go back and talk to the mayor. We got to ask the mayor, kind of thing, right? Mayor's there, or the mayor's designee who's, given authority to make a decision is, on hand.
Okay. All right.
I don't want to belay the point, but the financial committee doesn't have any ability to expend funds. It doesn't have any ability to bind the city to anything. It's really for information flow. It serves no other purpose than information flow.
Yeah, expenditure review, revenue projections, that kind of information is what I would envision being involved there.
Exactly.
One other thing I'd like to point out, back at the beginning of this ordinance, we have a statement under, and I'm just going to find it, gone through this so many times now, under C, and then I guess B, or C2, if the budget, it says if the budget ordinance is vetoed by the mayor, the present budget shall remain in effect unless and until a new budget ordinance is passed. I think we need to re-examine that language and make sure that it's in accordance with, our charter provisions. I'm concerned that language is a bit ambiguous, which with regard to what the present budget is. Specifically, is that the current year budget? Is it the mayor's budget submission? On the federal side, they default to, continuing resolution for the existing budget. I don't think that that's what we have in mind, but I think we need to make sure that that's explicit.
Good point. Good point, Councilman.
So for all those reasons, that was kind of why we discussed and thought it might be better to, let's tinker with the language a little bit, make sure it's something we really want, and then we can take a vote on it, in an upcoming meeting.
So just to kind of piggyback off of that, because again, that was another conversation that was up, was that final action. So in the charter, the final action taken upon the council would solidify the budget as being the new budget passed, correct?
Yes. The complicated provision that we bumped into this year was because there is a veto for the first time. And the charter provisions regarding the passage of the budget were drafted before the creation of the veto provision. When you started to combine the veto provision with the older charter provisions, it expedited some timelines on us. And what exactly amounts to a final action in the face of a veto was a question that we faced. I believe both myself and the solicitor concur on what constitutes a final action, but giving that some definition in the ordinance, I think would make sense. And to Councilman Cahoon's point, knowing exactly what budget is in force at what point in time should be crystal clear.
Okay, perfect.
And we could address that during the charter review process as well.
Absolutely.
And we should address that then.
Oh, very good.
Is it appropriate to motion to table at this point without retracting the earlier motion? Can we motion to table in the middle of a
Yes.
discussion? So, given that, I would move to table this ordinance pending those edits or those changes being made.
To the next meeting?
Is that realistic? I mean, I think it's.
That's fine.
I think it's
So
realistic.
would it be introduced the next council meeting for a vote?
For first passage?
So, yeah, pending.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So table, the motion will be to table first passage of this ordinance until the January 21st meeting.
With those changes that we discussed.
With those changes.
Amendment, okay.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you can't make more changes once you get it.
Right,
Right,
right. I'll second
No
that.
idea where you're at.
okay. Any other further questions? Before we move on to the next item?
Motion to table.
Motion
With
to
the
the table?
roll call.
Okay,
We need a second.
I'd second.
okay. Oh, you did, I'm sorry. Roll call, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
And Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
Oh. We are
Reconvene?
adjourned. No, we can skip over
Reconvene
that.
into executive session if necessary.
Next item would be adjournment if we are not going to reconvene.
So move. Adjourn.
Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
And Council President